Hi friends, I am back with another chapter of Hoot. We are in the middle of chapter 12 because it was a long one. We are at the hospital because Mullet Fingers has that infection from the dog bite and Roy's parents just showed up. Insane. Let's get to it. He walked to the double doors and pushed them open. Hey, Mom, Dad, I'm right here. Officer Delinko had insisted on giving the Eberhards a ride to the hospital. It was the decent thing to do, and also a prime opportunity to score points with Roy's father. The patrolman hoped that Mr. Eberhardt's son wasn't involved in the continuing mischief at the Pancake House construction site. What a sticky situation that would be. On the drive to the hospital, Roy's parents sat in the back seat and spoke quietly between themselves. His mother said she couldn't imagine how Roy had gotten bitten by a dog while he was working on a science project. Maybe it had to do with all that hamburger meat, she speculated. Hamburger? Roy's father. What kind of school project uses hamburger? In the rearview mirror, Officer Delinko would see Mr. Eberhardt put an arm around his wife's shoulders. Her eyes were moist and she was biting her lower lip. Mr. Eberhardt appeared as tightly wound as a cock spring. When they got to the emergency room, the desk clerk declared that Roy was sleeping and couldn't be disturbed. The Eberhardts tried to reason with him, but the clerk wouldn't budge. "We're his parents," Mr. Eberhardt shouted evenly, "and we need to see him right away." "Sir, don't make me call a supervisor." "I don't care if you call the Wizard of Oz," said Mr. Eberhardt. "We're going in." The clerk trailed them through the swinging double doors. "You can't do this," he objected, scooting ahead of the Eberhardts and blocking the hallway to the patient ward. Officer Delinko edged forward, assuming that the sight of a police uniform would soften the fellow's attitude. He was mistaken. "Absolutely no visitors. It says right here on the doctor's notes." The clerk solemnly waved a clipboard. "I'm afraid you'll have to go back to the waiting room. That means you too, officer." Officer Delinko shrank away. Not the Eberhardts. "Listen, that's our son lying in there," Roy's mother reminded the clerk. "You called us, remember? You told us to come." "Yes, and you may see Roy as soon as the doctor says it's allowed." "Then page the doctor, now." Mr. Eberhardt's tone of voice remained level, but the volume had gotten much louder. "Pick up the phone and dial. If you've forgotten how, we'll be happy to show you." "The doctor's on a break. She'll be back in 25 minutes, the clerk said tersely. "Then she can find us right here," Mr. Eberhardt said, "visiting our injured son. Now, if you don't move out of the way, I'm going to drop-kick you all the way to a city that I can't pronounce. Understand?" The clerk went pale. "I'm reporting you to my supervisor." "That's a dandy idea, Mr. Eberhardt," he said. He brushed past him and started down the hall, grabbing his wife by the elbow. "Hold it right there!" snapped a firm female voice behind him. The Eberhardts stopped and turned. Emerging from a door marked "Staff Only" was a woman wearing baby blue scrubs and a stethoscope. "I'm Dr. Gonzalez. Where do you think you're going?" "To see our son," replied Mrs. Eberhardt. "I tried to stop them," the desk clerk piped up. "You're Roy's parents?" the doctor asked the Eberhardts. "We are." Roy's father noticed Dr. Gonzalez eyeing them in odd curiosity. "Pardon me if this is out of line," she said, "but you sure don't look like you work on a crab boat." "What on earth are you talking about?" Roy's mother said. "Is everybody at this hospital a total wacko?" "There must be some mistake," Officer Delinko interrupted. "Mr. Eberhardt is a federal law enforcement agent." Dr. Gonzalez sighed. "We'll sort this out later. Come on, let's go peek in on your boy." The emergency patient ward had 6 beds, 5 of which were unoccupied. The 6th bed had a white privacy curtain drawn around it. "We've got him on IV antibiotics, and he's doing pretty well," Dr. Gonzalez said in a low voice. "But unless we find those dogs, he'll need a series of rabies injections, and those are no fun." The Eberhardts locked arms as they approached the enclosed bed. Officer Delinko stood behind them, wondering what color shirt Roy would be wearing. In the patrolman's pocket was the bright green scalp of clothing that snagged on the Mother Paulus fence. "Don't be surprised if he's sleeping," the doctor whispered, gently pulling the curtain away. Nobody said a word for several moments. The 4 grown-ups just stood there, blank-faced, staring at the empty bed. An empty bed. From a metal ring hung a plastic bag of ginger-colored fluid. The intravenous tube disconnected and dangled to the floor. Finally, Mrs. Eberhardt gasped, "Where's Roy?" Dr. Gonzalez's arms flapped helplessly. I don't know." "You don't know?" Mr. Eberhardt erupted. "1 minute an injured boy is asleep in his bed. The next minute he's vanished?" Officer Dolenko stepped between Mr. Eberhardt and the doctor. The patrolman was afraid that Roy's father was upset enough to do something he might regret later. "Where is our son?" Mrs. Eberhardt demanded again. The doctor buzzed for a nurse and frantically started searching for the emergency ward. "But he was the only patient in here," Mr. Eberhardt said. "How could you possibly lose the one and only patient you got? What happened? Did aliens beam him up to their spaceship while you were on your coffee break?" "Roy! Roy! Where are you?" cried Mrs. Eberhardt. She and Dr. Gonzalez began checking beneath other 5 beds in the ward. Officer Dolenko whipped out his portable radio and said, "I'm calling for backup." Just then, the double doors to the waiting room flew open. "Mom! Dad! I'm right here!" The Eberhardts practically smothered their son with a tandem hug. "Little devil," chuckled Officer Dolenko, holstering his radio. He was pleased to see that Roy was not wearing a torn green t-shirt. "Whoa!" Dr. Gonzalez clapped her hands sharply. "Everybody hold on a minute." The Eberhardts looked up quizzically. The doctor didn't seem especially overjoyed to have found her lost patient. "That's Roy?" she asked, pointing at their son. "Of course. Who else would it be?" Mrs. Eberhardt kissed the top of his head. "Honey, you get back into that hospital bed right now." "Not so fast," Mr. Eberhardt said. "I'm not sure what's going on here, but I've got a feeling we owe the doctor an apology. Probably several apologies." He planted both hands on Roy's shoulders. "Let's see those dog bites, partner." Roy lowered his eyes. "I didn't get bit, Dad. It wasn't me." Mrs. Eberhardt groaned. "Okay, now I get it. I'm the crazy one, right? I'm the one raving loony bird." "Folks, excuse me, but we've still got a major problem," Dr. Gonzalez said. "We've still got a missing patient." Officer Dolenko was thoroughly confused. Once again, he reached for his radio in anticipation of calling headquarters. "Before my brain explodes," Mrs. Eberhardt said, "would somebody please explain to me what this is all about?" "Only one person can do that," Mr. Eberhardt gestured to Roy, who suddenly wanted to crawl down a hole and hide. His father turned him around to face Dr. Gonzalez. "Tex?" she said, arching an eyebrow. Roy felt his face redden. "I'm really sorry. This is a hospital. This is no place for games." "I know it's not. I apologize." "If you're the real Roy," the doctor said, "then who is the young man in the bed, and where did he go? I want the truth." Roy stared at the tops of his sneakers. He couldn't remember another day in his life when so many things had gone wrong. "Son," his father said, "answer the doctor." His mother squeezed his arm. "Come on, honey. It's important." "You can be sure we'll find him," Officer Dolenko chimed in, "sooner or later." Bleakly, Roy looked up to address the grown-ups. "I don't know the boy's name, and I don't know where he is," he said. "I'm sorry, but that's the truth." And technically it was. That was the end of Chapter 12. We are going to proceed into Chapter 13 and see if time will allow for another chapter of Hoot, because this is getting really intense. While Roy took a shower, his mother made a pot of spaghetti. He ate 3 helpings, though the dinner gathering was quiet as a chess match. Setting down his fork, Roy turned to his father. "I guess it's the den, huh?" "That's correct." It has been years since Roy's gotten a spanking, and he doubted that he was in for one now. The den was where his father summoned him whenever there was a serious explaining to be done. Tonight, Roy was so tired that he wasn't sure if anything he had to say would make sense. His father was waiting, seated behind the broad walnut desk. "What you've got there?" he asked Roy. "A book." "Yes, I can see it's a book. I was hoping for the particulars." Roy's father could be sarcastic when he thought he wasn't getting a full answer. Roy figured it came from years of interrogating shifty characters, gangsters or spies, or whatever it was that his father was in the business of investigating. "I'm assuming," he said to Roy, "that the book will cast some light on tonight's strange events." Roy handed it across the desk. "You and Mom got it for me 2 Christmases ago." "I remember," he said, scanning the cover. "The Sibley Guides to Birds." Sure, it wasn't for your birthday? I'm sure, Dad. Roy had put the book on his Christmas list after he settled a friendly wager between him and his father. One afternoon, they'd seen a large reddish-brown raptor swoop down and snatch a ground squirrel off a cattle range in the Gallatin River Valley. Roy's father had bet him a milkshake that the bird was a young bald eagle whose crown feathers hadn't yet turned white, but Roy said it was a fully grown golden eagle, more common on the dry prairies. Later, after visiting the Bozeman Library and consulting Sibley, Roy's father conceded that Roy had been right. Mr. Eberhard held up the book and asked, "What does this have to do with all that nonsense at the hospital?" "Check out page 278. I marked it for you." His father flipped the book open to that page. "A burrowing owl," he read aloud from the text. "Long-legged and short-tailed, with relatively long, narrow wings and a flat head. Only small owl likely to be seen perched in the open daylight." His father peered quizzically at him over the top of the book. "Is this connected to that science project you were supposedly working on this afternoon?" "There is no science project," Roy admitted. "And the hamburger meat that your mother gave you?" "It was a snack for the owls." "Continue," Mr. Eberhard said. "It's a long story, Dad. And I've got nothing but time, son." "All right," Roy said. In some ways, he thought wearily, a spanking might be easier. "See, there's this boy," he began. "He's about the same age as me." Roy told his father everything. Well, almost everything. He didn't mention that the snakes distributed by Beatrice's Leap's stepbrother were highly poisonous and that the boy had actually taped their mouths shut. Such details might have alarmed Mr. Eberhard more than the petty acts of vandalism. Roy also chose not to reveal that Beatrice had nicknamed her stepbrother Mullet Fingers, just in case Roy's father felt legally obligated to report it to the police, or file it away in some government computer bank. Otherwise, Roy told what he knew about the running boy. His father listened without any interruption. "Dad, he's really not a bad kid," Roy said when he was finished. "All he's trying to do is save the owls." Mr. Eberhard remained silent for a few moments. He opened the Sibley Guide and looked at the color drawings of the small birds. "See, if Mother Paula's people bulldoze that property, they'll bury all the dens," Roy said. His father put the book aside and looked at Roy fondly, although with a trace of sadness. "Roy, they own the property. They can do pretty much whatever they please. But they've probably got all necessary paperwork and permits. They've got permits to bury owls?" Roy asked in disbelief. "The owls will fly away. They'll find new dens somewhere else." "But what if they've got babies? How will the babies fly, Dad? How will they fly away?" "I don't know," his father admitted. "How would you and Mom like it?" Roy pressed on. "If a bunch of strangers showed up one day with bulldozers to flatten this house, and all they had to say was, 'Don't worry, Mr. and Mrs. Eberhard, it's no big deal, just pack up and move to another place.' How would you feel about that?" Roy's father stood up slowly, as if the weight was 100 bricks on his shoulders. "Let's go for a walk," he said. It was a calm, cloudless night. A pale sliver of a moon peeked over the rooftops. Insects as thick as confetti swirled around the cowls of the streetlights. Towards the end of the block, 2 cats could be heard yowling at each other. Roy's father walked with his chin slightly downwards, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "You're growing up so fast," he remarked, catching Roy by surprise. "Dad, I'm the 3rd shortest kid in my homeroom." "That's not what I meant." As they went along, Roy hopped from crack to crack on the sidewalk. They talked about comfortable subjects, such as school, sports in school, until Roy nudged the conversation back towards the delicate subject of Mullet Fingers. He needed to know where his father stood. "You remember that last day we floated the Madison Canyon?" "Sure," his father said. "In inner tubes?" "Right," Roy said. "And remember we counted 5 great horned owls and 1 cottonwood? 5? "Yes, I remember." "And you tried to take a picture but the camera fell in the river?" "Not exactly. I dropped it in the river," Roy's father recalled. "Hey, it was a cheapo disposable." "Yeah, but it would have been a great snapshot. 5 in the same tree." "Yeah," said Roy. "That was pretty amazing." The owl story did the trick. His father took the cue. "This boy you told me about, you really don't know his name?" "He won't tell me." "Neither will Beatrice," Roy said. "That's the honest truth." All right, I will proceed the rest of this chapter in the next video.